In 1995, an American psychologist named Walter Mischel published the results of an experiment that had lasted for more than 20 years. The experiment began in the 1960s at Stanford University, where he placed 4-year-old children alone in a small room. In front of each child was a single marshmallow. He told them that if they could wait for 15 minutes without eating the marshmallow, they would receive 2 marshmallows instead. Then he left the room. Some of the children ate it immediately. Some tried to wait, but could not hold out. They stared at the marshmallow. They smelled it. They licked it a little. Then eventually they gave in, and a smaller group, by covering their eyes, singing, looking away, or telling themselves stories, managed to wait the full 15 minutes and receive 2 marshmallows. 20 years later, after following those children into adulthood, Mischel discovered something he had not entirely expected. The children who were able to wait for 15 minutes had significantly higher SAT scores, better health, more stable social relationships, fewer problems with addiction, and higher incomes in adulthood than the children who ate the marshmallow right away. The marshmallow experiment was never really about candy. It was about one of the most important abilities a human being can possess, the ability to tolerate present discomfort in exchange for a greater reward in the future. And if you are a trader, you have just heard the most accurate description possible of the psychological battle you face every single day when you sit in front of your screen. Because the financial markets, by their very nature, are one giant marshmallow experiment being conducted on everyone at the same time. And just like in Mischel's experiment, the outcome is not determined by intelligence. It is not determined by strategy. It is not determined by how many books you have read about technical analysis or how many self-proclaimed experts you follow on social media. It is determined by one thing only. Can you sit still long enough to earn the second marshmallow? But before we go any deeper, I want you to try a small exercise right now. Think back to the last 5 trades where you closed your position earlier than your original plan. Not the trades where your analysis changed. Not the trades where your stop loss was hit. I mean the trades where you saw green on the screen, felt restless for no clear reason, and decided to take profit before price reached the target you had set from the very beginning. Now imagine you had not done that. Imagine that in each of those trades you simply sat still. You took your hand off the mouse. You held the position until your original plan played out exactly as you had designed it before entering the trade. How much money would that difference be? I ask that question not to hurt you. I ask it because it is the only question that truly matters in your trading journey. It is not that you need a better strategy. It is not that you need a different market or a different time frame. The most important question has always been this. Why can't you stay in the trades that you yourself analyzed as valid, that you yourself planned in advance, and that you yourself confirmed were worth taking when you entered them? The answer to that question will change everything. To understand the answer, we need to go much farther back, far beyond the history of the financial markets, back to the evolutionary history of the human species. The human brain was designed for an environment completely different from the financial markets. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in a world where danger was immediate and visible. A wild animal was charging towards you. A hostile tribe was approaching from the horizon. Your food could be taken away at any moment by someone stronger. In that environment, one simple survival rule became deeply wired into the nervous system through thousands of generations of natural selection. Take what you can right now. Do not let it disappear. A small animal in your hand today is better than a large animal you have not caught tomorrow. That principle saved your ancestors' lives. It helped humanity survive through the harshest periods of history. Those who did not have that survival instinct, those who were willing to ignore the food right in front of them while waiting for something better in an uncertain future, usually did not live long enough to pass on their genes. But when you bring that same brain into a room with a computer screen and numbers flashing in front of you, that survival principle becomes the worst enemy you have ever had. Because in trading, taking what you have right now is exactly what is destroying you. Neuroscientists have studied this for decades, and what they discovered will make you see yourself in a completely different way. When you have an open position with profit fluctuating on the screen, a part of the brain called the amygdala becomes extremely active. The amygdala is the center for emotional processing and survival responses. It is the oldest evolutionary part of the human brain, the same part we share with reptiles from millions of years ago. The amygdala cannot read charts. It does not understand the concept of reward-risk ratio. It knows nothing about technical analysis or market trends. The only thing it knows is how to detect threats and trigger the fight or flight response. And here is the problem. The amygdala cannot tell the difference between a tiger charging toward you and a profit that might disappear. To it, both are threats that must be handled immediately. In both situations, it sends the same chemical signals to the rest of the brain. Cortisol surges, your heart rate increases, your muscles tighten, your vision narrows, and the response it was designed to produce is to eliminate the threat as quickly as possible, close the trade, take the profit, get out right now. But what is really interesting is what happens after you do that. When you close the trade early and feel relieved, a brain structure called the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center, releases a dose of dopamine. That feeling of relief is not random. It is the biological reward your brain gives you for escaping what it believes was danger. Just as your ancestors were rewarded with relief and exhilaration after escaping a wild animal, your brain rewards you for escaping the perceived threat. And this is where everything becomes truly dangerous. Every time you receive that reward, every time your brain gives you dopamine for closing a trade early, a neural connection becomes a little stronger. In neuroscience, there is a fundamental principle. Neurons that fire together wire together. The neural pathway between the anxiety of watching your profits fluctuate and the action of closing the trade early becomes thicker, stronger, and faster. After enough repetition, closing trades early is no longer a conscious decision. It becomes an automatic reflex, happening faster than your rational mind can intervene. This is why so many traders know they should not close trades early. They can explain every theory about why it is a mistake, yet they continue doing it again and again, not because they lack willpower, but because they are fighting against a neural program built far deeper than willpower alone can reach. You cannot use willpower to force your way out of a habit that has been encoded at the neural level. You have to understand it, redesign the environment around it, and build new experiences that gradually override it, one step at a time. But neuroscience is only part of the story. There is a deeper layer of psychology that very few people talk about, and it explains something that many traders find mysterious about themselves. Daniel Kahneman, the Israeli psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2002, spent his entire career studying how people make decisions under uncertainty. He was not an economist in the traditional sense. He was a psychologist who studied the irrational nature of human behavior in situations involving risk and reward. One of his most important discoveries, known as prospect theory, revealed an uncomfortable truth about human nature that every trader must confront. We do not evaluate outcomes based on their absolute value. We evaluate them based on how they differ from a reference point, usually where we currently stand. And more importantly, the pain of losing something is about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. Kahneman called this loss aversion, and it has a very specific impact on trading behavior. Imagine you have an open trade showing $50 of unrealized profit. Your brain does not calculate that your original target is $150, and that there is still another $100 of potential profit ahead. It does not perform that calculation calmly or rationally. Instead, what happens inside your mind is a completely different emotional calculation. Your brain is calculating that those $50 could disappear, and emotionally, losing $50 hurts more than twice as much as the pleasure of gaining another $100. So from your brain's evolutionary logic, the decision is perfectly reasonable. Take the profit now. Protect what you already have. Do not allow the possibility of losing it. But here is the truly subtle and dangerous part that Kahneman pointed out. When we are losing, that mechanism works in the exact opposite direction. When you have a trade in the red, your brain suddenly becomes more willing to take risks. It does not want to close the losing trade, because closing it means making the pain real, turning that floating loss on the screen into an undeniable reality. Instead, the brain hopes. It waits. It keeps the losing position far longer than necessary, believing that price will eventually reverse and erase the pain. This creates one of the most destructive behavioral patterns in trading, a pattern that almost every trader experiences, yet few people can explain. Taking profits too early when winning, holding losers too long when losing. This is not random indiscipline. It is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you are unsuited for trading. It is the inevitable result of how the human brain has been designed through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to deal with risk. And if you do not understand that, you will continue fighting against yourself without even knowing who you are fighting. Now let me tell you about something I call the execution gap. I believe this concept is more important than any trading strategy you could ever learn. The execution gap is the distance between what you know you should do and what you actually do when your emotions are at their highest. Take an honest look at this. Most traders already have enough knowledge to succeed. They understand reward-risk ratio. They know how important it is to let winning trades run. They can explain why closing a trade early is a mistake, and how it destroys the statistical edge of a trading system over time. Some of them could even write an entire essay about trading psychology. But the moment the screen turns green and emotions begin to rise, all of that knowledge vanishes as though it never existed, not because they forgot, but because during moments of intense emotion, a different part of the brain takes control of behavior, not the rational part they use to learn when they are calm, but the emotional part, the evolutionary part, the part that is screaming, danger is coming, do something right now. This is something most trading books never tell you directly. Knowledge and behavior under pressure are two completely different things, and the gap between them can only be closed by one thing: not reading more books, not watching more videos, but repeated experience under real conditions, where you learn to sit still and do nothing, even while every instinct inside you is screaming that you must act. Think about a pilot. Not a pilot sitting in a classroom, studying the theory of aerodynamics, but a pilot inside the cockpit when one engine suddenly fails at an altitude of 9,000 meters. In that moment, the pilot does not stop to review the textbook. They do not stop to think about what they learned. They react. Their hands move before their conscious mind has time to process what is happening. And that reaction comes only from hundreds, even thousands, of hours inside real cockpits and flight simulators, where they have experienced the same situation so many times that the correct response has become as automatic as breathing. A trader needs the same thing, but not by reading more books or attending more seminars. By systematically building experience in sitting with discomfort and observing what happens when they refuse to act on emotion. Every time you hold a trade through a small pullback and watch price continue moving in your favor, your brain records a new piece of evidence. Evidence that the discomfort of waiting is not a real danger signal. Evidence that your plan can be trusted. Evidence that you are capable of controlling your behavior even when emotions are rising. Those pieces of evidence accumulate over time, and little by little they build a new neural pathway, a pathway whose destination is calm, discipline, and self-control instead of panic and impulsive action. But there is an even deeper truth that I want to place right in front of you. A truth that very few traders are willing to admit to themselves. Most people who cannot hold their trades are not simply lacking discipline. They are missing something even more fundamental. They lack genuine confidence in themselves and in their trading system. Let's separate these two ideas very clearly. Knowing and believing are two completely different things. You may know that your strategy has a statistical edge. You may know that your reward-risk ratio is 1 to 3. You may know all of that and still not believe it deeply enough to allow yourself to act consistently on that knowledge. Real belief is not something you can read into your mind. It does not come from memorizing rules or repeating positive affirmations every morning. Real belief is built from evidence, from direct experience, from watching your system work enough times, not perfectly every time, but consistently enough over time to create a solid foundation you can stand on during your hardest moments. And here is the vicious cycle that traps so many traders. They do not believe in their system enough to hold their trade, and because they never hold their trades, they never accumulate enough evidence to build that belief. They remain stuck forever in a state of hesitation, wanting to believe, but never having enough proof to truly believe. The way out of that cycle is not to force yourself to believe more through willpower. It is to build evidence systematically, backtest your strategy across a large enough historical data set, keep a trading journal for every trade, and compare the results of following your plan against breaking it. Start with smaller positions so the emotional pressure is lower, and you have room to practice holding trades without taking too much risk. Every small step builds evidence. Every piece of evidence builds belief, and every small piece of belief creates the foundation for real discipline. There is an image I want you to keep in your mind whenever you think about holding trades. Imagine you are standing on a small boat in the middle of the ocean during a storm. Waves slam against the hull, the wind is roaring, rain is pouring down, and you cannot see the shore. In that moment, fear is completely natural, completely understandable, but what matters is not whether you feel afraid. What matters is whether you trust the compass in your hand. Because the compass does not care about the storm. It is not affected by the waves or the wind. It simply points north, always north, no matter what is happening around it. Your trading plan is that compass. Your analysis before entering the trade, when your mind was still calm and untouched by emotion, is your north. And the storm, the price fluctuations, the pullbacks, the strange periods when nothing seems to happen, all of that is simply noise. None of it changes north. It only makes north harder to see. The only question during those moments is this: do you trust your compass? But I want to go even deeper into something most people completely overlook when talking about holding trades: the role of time. Time is the most uncomfortable part of trading. Not financial risk, not market uncertainty, time itself. Let me explain why. When a trade is losing, at least something is happening. You are feeling pain, but at least there is a clear event you are reacting to. Your emotions have a specific target, but when a trade is showing a small profit and then just sits there, neither moving up nor moving down, simply hovering while you stare at the screen, that is what truly tortures the mind. Nothing is happening. Only time is passing. And that emptiness, that feeling that nothing is happening, drives the brain crazy. Because the brain hates uncertainty. It hates emptiness. And when there is no information to process, it creates its own information by filling the empty space with the worst possible scenarios. Price has been sitting still for too long. Maybe the trend is over. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I should get out and wait for a clearer opportunity. Maybe this capital could be used better in another trade. None of those thoughts come from analysis. They come from impatience, searching for any reasonable excuse to justify closing the trade. And here is something I want you to understand very clearly. The market does not move according to your schedule. Price does not care whether you feel restless or whether you have stared at the screen long enough and need something to happen. The market moves according to the logic of supply and demand, according to forces building beneath the surface, forces you can never fully see or control. Your job is not to make the market move faster. Your job is to survive the waiting, with a mind calm enough not to interfere with what is unfolding according to its own logic. There is a very deep paradox in trading that I want to spend some time on. The harder you try to control every small movement of price, the more you lose real control. And the more you let go of the need to control every single moment, the more control you gain over the only thing that truly matters, your own behavior. Think about it this way. A professional musician performing in front of an audience is not thinking about every individual finger. They are not tracking every single note and making a conscious decision about how to play it. All of that has already been built into muscle memory, into reflexes, into what psychologists call the flow state, where action happens naturally without constant intervention from conscious thought. But that is only possible because they have practiced for thousands of hours under controlled conditions. They have placed themselves under pressure. They have made mistakes. They have learned. They have adjusted. They have repeated the process again and again, until trust in themselves and in their instrument became so deep that it no longer needed to be maintained through willpower. Professional traders are the same. When they have an open trade, they are not watching every candle with anxiety. They are not constantly reevaluating whether they should exit. They already checked all of that before entering the trade. Now they are in a different state, a state of calm observation, watching without judging, waiting without worrying, ready to act if the plan requires it, without being dragged around by every small fluctuation in the market. That state is not a lack of attention. It is the highest form of attention. Attention that is no longer disturbed by emotion. Now I want to talk about a distinction that I believe is incredibly important, yet almost always overlooked. The difference between patience and hope. From the outside, they look almost identical. Both involve holding a trade when you feel uncertain. Both require you to sit still when part of you wants to act. But internally, they are fundamentally different. And that difference determines whether holding your trade is discipline or irresponsibility. Patience is when you hold a trade that is still valid according to your analysis. The reasons you entered the trade are still intact. Your plan has not been invalidated by price action. You are waiting for the market to complete what your setup suggested would happen. And you are holding the trade not because you are afraid of realizing a loss, but because you believe the conditions for the trade still exist. Hope is when you hold a trade after those original conditions are gone. Price has already broken an important structure that justified your entry. The fundamental news has changed significantly. Every technical signal is pointing in the opposite direction. Yet you continue holding the trade because you do not want to admit that you were wrong, and you do not want to feel the pain of realizing a loss. That difference is not always obvious in real time, but there is one question that can help you tell the difference. Ask yourself, if I did not already have this trade, and I looked at this chart right now with a completely neutral mind, would I enter this trade in this direction? If the answer is yes, holding the trade is patience. If the answer is no, holding the trade is hope. This is one of the simplest and most effective tests you can apply to every open position you have. I want to tell you about a type of trader I call the engineer trader, the opposite of the hunter trader. The hunter trader approaches the market with the mindset of a hunter, always on high alert, always looking for the next opportunity, never truly relaxed because relaxing feels like missing something. When there is an open trade, they watch every tick of price with intense focus. Every small movement is a signal that must be analyzed. Every red candle is a threat that demands a response. That mindset may sound professional, but in reality it is extremely expensive emotionally. And once your emotions are exhausted, your discipline disappears with them. The engineer trader approaches the market in a completely different way. They think about trading the same way an engineer thinks about a system. There is an input, there is a process, there is an output. The engineer's job is not to interfere with every step of the process. The engineer's job is to design the system correctly, make sure it is operating according to its design, and intervene only when the system actually deviates from its original parameters. When the engineer trader has an open trade, they are not watching every candle. They already defined clear conditions before entering. Conditions that would require action only if they changed. Until then, they allow the system to do its job. That is not passivity. It is the highest form of control. Control not through constant intervention, but through setting things up correctly from the beginning, and having enough discipline not to destroy what was already built. The difference between these two traders is not intelligence. It is not experience. It is their fundamental trading philosophy, and that philosophy shapes every decision they make, from the way they prepare before entering a trade to the way they sit still after the trade has been triggered. Let's talk about the mathematics behind all of this, because I think many traders never truly face the numbers head-on. Suppose you have a strategy with a 45% win rate and an average reward-risk ratio of 1 to 3. That means for every trade, you risk 1 unit for the opportunity to make 3 units. With those numbers, your strategy has a clear statistical edge. If you execute 100 trades with perfect discipline, your 45 winning trades will produce 135 units of profit, while your 55 losing trades will cost only 55 units. Your net profit is 80 units. That is a good system. That is the kind of system professional traders use. But now, look at what happens when you do not hold your trades until the target. Suppose because of impatience you usually take profit at only 1/3 of your original target. That means your actual reward-risk ratio becomes 1 to 1 instead of 1 to 3. With the same 45 winning trades, you now earn only 45 units instead of 135, and your 55 losing trades still cost 55 units. Now your net result is -10 units. You have just turned a profitable system into a losing system, not because the strategy changed, not because the market changed, but simply because your psychology would not allow the system to operate the way it was designed. And here is the cruelest part of all. When you look at your results and see that you are losing money, your first instinct is to blame the strategy. You search for a new system. You change your indicators, you move to a different market, and the cycle begins again, wearing a different mask, but driven by the exact same core problem. The problem was never the strategy. The problem has always been the gap between the reward-risk ratio on paper and the reward-risk ratio you actually achieve in real trading. I want to talk about something I call the second voice. Every trader knows the first voice. It is the voice that screams at you to close the trade right now. It is the voice of fear, the voice of survival, the voice of the amygdala shouting that danger is coming. It is the voice you have heard thousands of times and already know you should not listen to. But there is a second voice, far more subtle, far more dangerous, and very few people recognize it. The second voice does not scream, it whispers. And what makes it so dangerous is that it sounds almost exactly like reason. The second voice says things like, the market looks weaker on the lower time frame. Maybe I should take partial profits to protect my account. Economic news is about to be released and volatility could increase. It would be better to exit before the uncertainty. If price pulls back to this area, I can always re-enter at a better price. All of those thoughts sound perfectly reasonable. They sound like analysis. They sound like professional caution. But if you are completely honest with yourself, most of those thoughts do not arise from objective observation of the market. They appear because you feel uncomfortable, and your brain is searching for any reasonable excuse to justify closing the trade. This is one of the most important skills a trader can develop, the ability to distinguish real analysis from emotional rationalization, the ability to recognize when your brain is observing the market, and when it is simply creating a story to justify what your emotions already decided beforehand. The only way to build that skill is to write down your thoughts while you are trading, not afterward. During the actual moment, while those thoughts are appearing, write down why you want to exit the trade early. Then, after the trade is over, read it again and ask yourself whether those reasons were based on real evidence or were simply emotional rationalizations. Over time, you will begin to notice patterns. You will begin to see clearly the difference between the voice of analysis and the voice of fear wearing the clothes of reason. There is one question I want you to ask yourself every time you feel the urge to close a trade early. The question is not, should I exit the trade? The question is, what has actually changed? Not your feelings, not your level of comfort, not whether you have been staring at the screen for too long, but what has actually changed in your analysis since you entered the trade? If the answer is that price has broken an important structure, if market conditions have changed significantly, If the risk of the trade has increased in measurable ways, then you have a genuine reason to reconsider your position. But if the answer is that nothing has truly changed except the way you feel, then you already know what that means. It means you are in a battle with yourself, not with the market, not with your strategy, but with the part of yourself that wants immediate comfort more than long-term results. And in that battle, knowing exactly who you are fighting is the first step toward victory. Let's talk about something most traders never dare to admit to themselves. Not all lack of discipline in trading comes from emotion or lack of knowledge. Part of it comes from the trading culture we live in. Social media has created a fantasy world of trading, where people share perfect entries, huge profits, and highlight moments. No one posts a screenshot of sitting for 3 hours, watching a trade go nowhere. No one writes about holding a trade through an uncomfortable pullback and waiting in silence. Those things do not generate likes. They do not impress people. As a result, we are constantly being reminded of moments of action, fast decisions, and trades executed with confidence, while the most important part of professional trading, patiently waiting and doing nothing, remains completely invisible. That creates a dangerous illusion that good trading means taking action all the time, making quick decisions, and constantly looking for the next opportunity. That sitting still and doing nothing is laziness, unprofessional, or a sign that you are missing opportunities. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The traders who succeed over the long run are often the ones who act the least. They wait for the clearest setups. They enter fewer trades, but with greater conviction. And once they are in the trade, they allow it to play out, instead of constantly interfering. Patience in trading is not only about holding a trade after entering. It is also about being patient enough to wait for truly high-quality setups, instead of trading simply because you feel the need to do something. Both forms of patience come from the same source, the ability to tolerate the discomfort of not acting, even when everything around you seems to be telling you to do something. There is one thing I have not mentioned yet, but it needs to be said directly. The truth that not every trade you hold will end well. Sometimes you follow your plan perfectly, and you still lose. Price moves in your favor for a while, then reverses and hits your stop loss. You did everything right, and you still lost money. That is normal. That is unavoidable. And it does not mean you were wrong to hold the trade. This is something many traders do not understand deeply enough. Trading is not an activity where every correct decision produces a good outcome. Trading is an activity where correct decisions made consistently over time produce better overall results. No single trade is important enough to determine whether you made the right decision. The only thing that can tell you is the outcome of hundreds or thousands of trades executed with the same discipline. So when you follow your plan, hold the trade, and still lose, do not use that outcome as proof that holding the trade was wrong. Do not let one unfavorable result justify changing your behavior in the future. The right question is not, how did this trade end? The right question is, did I follow my plan? If the answer is yes, then you succeeded, regardless of the outcome of that individual trade. And once you can evaluate yourself that way, completely separated from short-term results, you have begun to think like a true professional trader. I want to finish by returning to the story of the marshmallow. Michel did not only discover that the children who could wait achieved better outcomes in life, he discovered something even more important. He discovered how those children managed to wait. They did not wait by staring at the marshmallow, using willpower to fight temptation. The children who tried that approach usually failed. The marshmallow was too tempting. The temptation was too powerful. The children who succeeded did something different. They covered their eyes so they could not see the marshmallow. They turned their faces away. They sang songs. They told themselves stories. They changed their environment and redirected their attention instead of trying to fight temptation head-on. That is the most important lesson for traders. Discipline is not about staring at the screen, trying to defeat the temptation to close your trade through willpower alone. If you do it that way, your willpower will always run out. The market will always have enough time to wear down your patience. Real discipline is about redesigning your environment and your process so that temptation either never appears or at least no longer holds the same power over you. Set your stop loss and take profit before entering the trade so you never have to make those decisions while your emotions are rising. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Create clear rules about the only conditions that are allowed to change your plan and never change it outside those conditions. Build pre-trade rituals that help you enter a calm state instead of an anxious one. You are not fighting against your brain. You are designing a system where your brain no longer has the opportunity to sabotage you. Finally, let's return to the question I asked at the very beginning. Think back to the last 5 trades where you closed your position earlier than your original plan, and I asked you about the difference in money. Now, I want to ask a different question, a deeper one. In those moments, When your finger was hovering over the close button, what was really happening? Were you protecting yourself from the market, or were you protecting yourself from discomfort? That is the question every trader needs to sit with and answer honestly. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself, in silence. Because when you can look directly at that question and clearly see the answer, something begins to change. Not immediately, not completely, but little by little, one trade at a time. One moment where you choose discipline instead of immediate comfort. The financial markets are one giant marshmallow experiment, and the reward does not go to the smartest people or the luckiest people. It goes to those who can sit still long enough to earn the second marshmallow. The only question left is this: will you be one of them?